Welcome to the Sisterhood of Limitless Living. I'm Dr. April Moreno, autoimmune wellness researcher and professional helping women around the world to live their best possible lives despite the autoimmune condition. Listen in as we speak on various topics about the autoimmune journey and interview amazing and inspiring women who are living and thriving despite their autoimmune condition. Let's get started. Hello, Sisterhood. Happy autumn. I hope you're enjoying the cooler weather these days. The sunny days are still kind of here, and it's still warm over here in California, but definitely we're seeing a change of the seasons. It's getting dark sooner, and I'm looking forward to the cooler weather of the autumn. So happy autumn to you all. Today we're talking about naturopathic medicine. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Erin Rhae, a naturopathic doctor. And this is very timely because right now we are preparing for the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine conference. And so the work that she does is very much connected to integrative medicine and health. So I'm really excited to share this topic with you all. So yeah, here at the Sisterhood of Limitless Living, it is conference season. And so this month of October, I'm going to be attending 3 different conferences. And so I'm really excited about that here. One conference is the Women's Podcast Conference that just took place in Los Angeles, which was an excellent opportunity to learn more, connect with people. And then another couple of conferences this month are going to be related to healthcare, health and medical topics. And definitely going to be sharing the message of autoimmune awareness, the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast, sharing that information with others in the healthcare community as well. So I'm really excited about that. So let's go ahead and get started and share this wonderful interview with you with Dr. Erin Rhae. Hello, Sisterhood. Welcome to another episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Erin Rhae, a naturopathic doctor who is living with autoimmune conditions and also serves the autoimmune community with clinical services through naturopathic medicine. So welcome, Erin.
Hi, April. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Moreno. It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much. It's really good to see you again. And so I am so excited to have you on the podcast. And I would love for you to just tell us a little bit more about you and let us know a little bit more about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I've been living with an autoimmune condition from 8 years of age. I decided I wanted to be a doctor when I was 3. I changed what I wanted to do when I was 14, but went to medical school at a naturopathic medical university here in San Diego, California. It is an offshoot of the original campus of Bastyr University. I went to Bastyr University, California as part of their inaugural class in 2016. So I went to college and studied what I thought I also wanted to do after I'd had that career change. And what happened is I got into another car accident my junior year in college and had a real flare in my autoimmune sort of pathologies, as they said, or disease at that particular moment, and realized even though I had this dream job in college that it didn't really feel right. There was more of this sense of I was doing something that was kind of against my inner knowing or my inner being. And so I graduated from college. I happened to be in India when I finished school. I worked in a women's reproductive clinic and really found my passion for medicine and for advocating for people who needed sort of more information or who needed to be given another chance or another opportunity at health and healing. I did apply to allopathic medical school. I was going to go to a DO school, and then also had that like inner yearning that wasn't what was really right for me, and decided instead to look at naturopathic medicine, because I had a naturopathic medical doctor when I was 15 years of age who was really very helpful for me and for my health. So that's kind of full circle how I've come to naturopathic medicine. And it's interesting, in naturopathic medicine, there's so many different nuances and different capacities, but the one theme I keep on seeing is patients who need more assistance or who need more information and who need to be oftentimes tested to the full gamut and spectrum of health. And oftentimes we find an underlining either nutritional deficiency or detoxification pathway deficiency, but oftentimes there is an autoimmune presentation I kind of almost require, for lack of a better word, an ANA for almost all of my patients, because more often than not, what I see as a similarity is a presentation that does have this underlying autoimmune capacity. Or like myself, I was diagnosed with psoriasis at 8 years of age. And instead of looking further at other underlying issues, they just said, hey, it's psoriasis. There's really no talk about autoimmunity, even though my mom is also an individual living with type 1 diabetes, and we should have done some more research, or could have done, let's not live in a world full of shoulds, as they say, could have done some more research on finding some underlying things for myself and my own health.
Mm-hmm. Wow. There's a lot there I didn't know about.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
I believe in transparency. I don't usually talk about myself with my patients, but if my patients want to inquire, I do oftentimes tell them about the roads that I've had to take in order to get to the right medical practitioner, as well as the right supplements, as well as the right dietary interventions, as well as to rule in or to rule out if medications are really needed at a particular time, is kind of what that looks like.
Wow, my goodness. So tell us, how are you doing these days? How are you feeling?
I just came back from a trip, which was really very lovely and healing. I was studying the Blue Zone in Ikaria in Greece. So while I was feeling amazing and fantastic when I was there, traveling is one of those personal autoimmune triggers that can happen for me. So right now I'm dealing with a sore throat, actually. And I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for quite some time, so I have some issues sometimes with my joints and ligaments, and had a fall when I was in Greece that now is making me be a lot more accountable for things that I know to be true, meaning I could do a better job at stretching, and I could do a better job of making sure I'm getting the sleep that I need, and I can do a better job of wearing the right shoes for activities and things like that. Fashion is awesome, but really functionality and health is more important than fashion when it comes to shoes and things like that. So I am doing okay right now, but I've realized there are certain things I need to do when I come back from travel to kind of help myself out. I need to maybe meal prep before I leave, or hire a delivery service if that's something that I can afford at that particular time. I need to make sure that I had snacks for the beginning of my trip. I need to make sure that I have snacks for the end of the trip, is what that is. I wrote a huge autoimmune post on my Instagram talking about traveling with autoimmunity and what that looks like. And I did, like I said, a good job going, but not the best job going back. It's really important to have that on both sides of travel. And picking the right airports to go to is what I would say. I don't think I'll be headed through Chicago O'Hare anytime soon, is what I'll say to that.
Yeah, that place is chaos. It is huge.
Yes.
And crowded.
Yes, it is chaos and it is huge. And almost every time I speak to someone, they have the same feeling about it. However, I did learn in regards to nutrition, Chicago O'Hare actually uses vegetable towers. So Terminal 3, they get all of their own produce from places that they are currently growing, is what I would say. It's awesome.
So I love the points that you mentioned about, you talk about the fact that you are a naturopathic doctor, but then you talk about these other things that you have the power to make changes to outside of medicine. You talk about
Right.
managing your time, managing travel,
Right.
navigating that, preparing your food, nutrition,
Right.
rest, all these things. I think that's so
Right.
important. And these are things that we often talk about in the group as well. It's no longer just about dependence on what the doctor's telling us to do and we'll just
Right.
follow those orders, right? It's about how we're going to navigate that in all aspects of our lives. And I really respect the fact that as a naturopathic doctor, you address the clinical, the medical, the naturopathic side of things, the treatment side, but also the fact that there are so many things that we have under our control on an everyday basis. I love the fact that you mentioned those things.
Right. I also share that commonality with you that I'm so passionate about some of the work that you've been doing and basically public health in general, which is the social determinants of health. That's a major core principle of naturopathic medicine. And oftentimes what I know in myself and what I also know in my patients is that oftentimes there isn't a food, a medication, a supplement, or a new treatment regime that's really going to help you. It's asking really big questions and getting even bigger answers and coming to those answers yourself in reality of, how am I feeling today? Where am I living? What are the choices that I'm making? What am I putting into my body? Who are the relationships that I'm surrounding myself with and things like that? Those are kind of the things that are really sort of self-evident in being a naturopathic doctor.
I love that. So we are there. We are We're
Yeah,
thinking about those same things.
we have that neural resonance going on for sure, is what I will say, in that capacity. And you can't, like, I think a big part of naturopathic medicine, I see, it's not it's not and or, it's usually yes and, but and, yet and. There's always something else to really change, or anything that really is part of that social determinant. It's a and situation is what I would really like to bring forth.
That's beautiful. Yes, and that's why, I can see the connection why we're both members of the AIHM.
Yes, exactly. AIHM is the acronym that we use, but it's the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. I love how the health is actually first and the medicine is after that, because we're really talking about that totality, those determinants of health before we look at the medicine aspect.
Tell us a bit more about naturopathic medicine, how important it is, and the things that you've seen with the autoimmune community. When they come to see you for help, what is it that they're usually looking for? What is it that you are helping them to do? What is naturopathic medicine?
I have various elevator pitches from, like 3 seconds to 7 minutes. I think the core of this group, what I'll really share is the idea behind naturopathic medicine is that we are trying to get down to the root cause of what's going on using the least invasive modalities possible. We do have this sort of, what are the social determinants of health? Oftentimes we're talking about that, as I previously mentioned, but there's kind of a hierarchy that we're really getting at. Also, not forgetting things on the bottom, like, are you having a bowel movement? Are you drinking enough water? Where does your food come from? These basic things that we need. Are you exercising? Are you sleeping? And then after we've really looked at those and changed those, I'm not a naturopathic doctor that is supplement forward. I'm really more lifestyle behavior and food as medicine forward before I go to supplements. A lot of my patients have already tried those behavior and lifestyle modifications. So for those, we do start a little bit more with supplements and or medications and or other higher interventions. I would say overall that for me, it's really about finding a patient, meeting them where they're at. Most people come to me after they've gone to 1,000 other doctors, for lack of a better word. It's not really 1,000. I would say it's probably between 3 to 7, to tell you the truth. And they're either having, what I'm told often is that they feel like they aren't being listened to, or they aren't getting labs run the way that they need labs to be run. So for me, that goes back to that earlier conversation that I had, which is if I have a patient who's presenting with what another doctor thinks is heavy metal, but they've been doing heavy metal chelation treatment with another doctor, and they still have leg pain, and they still have muscle pain, and they still have joint pain, I'm going to look at running an ANA on that person, or looking at rheumatoid factor, or looking at other inflammatory pathways and markers, C-reactive protein, ESR, things like that, before I'm just going to try to give them another diagnosis. I want to understand who they are as a person, and as their blood chemistry is telling me before I kind of go off and give them, say that yes, that diagnosis isn't great, or give them another diagnosis. It's really kind of looking at whole picture what's really going on. I usually say that I'm kind of an investigative journalist, because the first appointment, I'm just asking, after intake, I ask the same questions oftentimes over again, and I try asking more questions and more questions and more questions to figure out what's really going on, is what happens for me. I do have some individuals who come in for kind of preventative care. I also have a lot of women who are experiencing what we call subclinical hypothyroidism. They have oftentimes a grandmother, a mother, a sister who's presenting with something like Hashimotos, and they themselves, they want to keep their thyroids and their diet and their other food choices and their supplements kind of as healthy, and possibly preventing or taking control of an early presentation of an autoimmune disease pathology. Kind of as mentioned before, even myself, when I first got diagnosed with psoriasis, my mom had already been living with type 1 diabetes for about 25 years. And what I would like to have had done at that age 8 is to have a celiac panel done as well for myself and for her, so that we could have looked at other pathologies that might have been sort of hiding in some way, shape, or form, and prevented myself and my mom, reaching thresholds. Preventing thresholds could have been positive, or can be positive, is what I would say in my own health history and in my other patients as well.
You've seen a lot of patients with things like Hashimotos, thyroid issues.
Yes.
What other types of challenges have you very commonly?
I see a lot of rheumatoid arthritis. I see a lot of individuals who have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and it's actually something we need to find something else, is what I would say. I have a few patients who are living with MS. I have a lot of patients who are living with multiple autoimmune presentations, meaning lupus, scleroderma, and Sjogren's. I have seen more lupus. The longer I practice, the more common it's been. I'd say even from when I started 8 years ago, the amount of autoimmune diagnoses that I saw, they were usually something more of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but now we see this where you have 3 of them being diagnosed kind of at the same time, as some celiac disease as well. I've seen a lot of celiac disease myself because I lectured for a festival called the Nourish Festival that used to be the Allergy-Free, Gluten-Free Expo. And I found a lot of patients and patient populations here in San Diego or in Arizona also where I practice. And you start seeing one patient and then they just refer their children to you, and then you see their cousins, and then you're just kind of seeing everyone, is what I would say. I see a few people who rheumatologists or endocrinologists isn't really willing to give them a diagnosis, and they want a diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So I run the full gamut of labs again that really helps me to figure out that there's something else going on. Mm-hmm. It's a simple marker to check for Hashimoto's. You can have very high autoantibodies for Hashimoto's and really not show up with that actual presentation of the TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, being effective in any particular way. I like to always run T3 because we have TSH is sort of up in the brain. It signals and release. We have T4, and then the active form of thyroid is really T3. And what's fascinating is oftentimes people have a normal TSH, a normal T4, but their T3 is really actually quite low. And then from all the conferences and other endocrinologists I've shadowed, some of the laboratory markers, those national averages aren't really the optimal or ideal level. So it's important to kind of look at and study more of a, for lack of a better word, like functional blood chemistry to really look at, a quartile that is a different quartile and what's the national kind of average is what I would say on that one.
You mentioned the fact that you've seen more recently this
Right.
emergence
Right.
of autoimmunity. What do you think is going on?
People often ask, is it nature or is it nurture? There's definitely that genetic component that we have. I've done a lot of research and self-exploration into what this is. I've definitely been in bed for months at a time with the blinds closed and enshrouded in my own thoughts and feelings, sometimes good, sometimes not so good, which is something that I can empathize with often with patients. What I've really found is stress. I'm a firm believer that there's 3 major pathologies in life, that there's origins. It's really genetics and inflammation and stress will cause all of those things to really sort of flare, is what I would say. It's fascinating, and I was just in Ikaria last week. They have a lot of maybe tomorrow, and there's just it's a non-negotiable. Things get done at a much slower pace. People respond to emails 3 days later. People take meetings. An afternoon meeting is basically from 12 p.m., until 7 o'clock at night, or maybe 9 o'clock. I think that stress is really the largest component, and stress includes things like environmental toxicants. It includes increased sort of strain on detoxification pathways. It also includes sort of lifestyle, chasing the dream, this having to have something or another. That's kind of what I see it as well. And I see a lot more women than men with autoimmune conditions. I do also see things that were never expected. I think in my practice alone, in my private practice, I have 2, and then in my clinic, we have 3 men who are living with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And just that presentation in the male population is very small. And the fact that there's a percentage in the clinic that actually has these presentations is just kind of interesting and different, to tell you the truth. And it's the same thing again. They look at the research over time. Hashimoto's in 1985 was basically nothing. And now it's for lack of a better word, it's the common diagnoses that we have, what I would say.
A few episodes ago, I spoke to Dr. Noel Rose, had done some of the initial research in Hashimoto's. They talked about the emergence. We talked about the fact that autoimmune is continuing to be more diagnosed, that it's more frequently happening with women. I think that's a huge issue. Like, there's biomarkers, but then there's stress. Some things are going to happen.
Yeah, and also, exactly. And those biomarkers also can even change with stress. We had a professor in naturopathic medical school who was studying the biomarkers of students during finals week versus students during midterms versus students sort of throughout the school year. and students. I think he was trying to do something that was about like 3 years out of school, and he was also trying to get them before they started naturopathic medicine. But your basic laboratory markers you're looking at, something like a complete blood count to see what your white blood cell count is when you are stressed versus when you're in your stride and thriving, for lack of a better analogy.
I think we've seen that so many times in our group, the same types of conversations about stress and how they have brought about relapses, things that maybe may have never shown up or may have taken many more years later on to come or emerge later in the future instead. I would love to hear a little bit more about your trip to one of the blue zones. I love learning about the blue zones. I think we all need to just like become more like blue zones. We need to expand that.
Yeah. And we need to talk about them more often because it's nice. It's really great to hear that you're into the blue zones. I've gotten a lot of people from my comments, even people messaging me, like sending me photos through my own Instagram that wanted to disprove the blue zones. I'm like, instead of disproving the blue zones, let's talk about some similarities that they do share, which is the biggest things that I would say that they have is they have a sense of community. In Ikeria, there is one homeless gentleman. They called him the homelessness man, is what they called him. They bond together in order to take care of this individual who is without a home. They have him do jobs around the town. They always make sure that he's fed. He has a place to stay. If it's raining outside, he chooses to not stay. My understanding is he chooses to not stay in that place otherwise. He likes to be kind of out in nature. But they have this sense of community on this very small island. And this island is very rocky. The facts are that 1 in 3 Ikarians lives to be 90 plus. Having said that, it's also really fascinating that it's been in this area that's had a lot of political sort of disjointment from, it's somewhere in between, it's closer to Turkey than to Greece, but it's still Greece proper. But the interesting thing is even during political turmoil, they've always had a sense of community and they've always taken care of their own. So they do a lot of other things that blue zones do. They eat a mainly plant-based diet. They all consume beans, which I think is really interesting in this day and age where 1 in 3 patients in my office, or maybe 1 in 4, is constantly telling me they can't do beans because they've read the plant paradox, or they're living with SIBO and that they just can't do beans in any way, shape, or form. So it's really very fascinating. They're really bean forward. Beans are served at all 3 meals, and they eat a lot of olive oil. So it's very confusing to me. I've done a lot of studies with looking at fats in the diet, but according to the research, I think it's something almost 50% of their calories are coming from olive oil. Pushing centenarians or 90 plus, they also exercise often. They work on the land. They climb up these crazy high hills all of the time. My partner and I could only have a 2-seater, and I was having to like sit very close to him because the cars are so small and the roads are very narrow. They also take time for rest. So beyond that maybe tomorrow capacity, the stores close between 2 to 3 and do not open between 7 to 9 p.m. is what I would say. They eat later in the evening, which I think is really interesting with the conversations we have with intermittent fasting, but they are religious. So they do oftentimes fast several times during the year. The last thing that I think is interesting for them is that they do drink wine, but they don't really go past 2 glasses a day, is what I've come to know and learn about that as well. My partner also did some research. He's been studying the blue zones, I think, for about 18 years. And he has done Costa Rica as well as the Nicoya Peninsula. And he danced with people that were 101 years of age and said they were more spry than individuals who are here living in the States on the dance floor. And the same thing is true for them as well. They're very being forward. They do a lot of exercise. They really do believe in community. There oftentimes is this religious component that does happen. Those are some of the things that really are fascinating to me because it really is, oftentimes it's really social determinants of health. There were a lot of individuals, there were a couple people in Ikeria that were saying that all of these journalists came to these islands trying to find the magic elixir, and that there really isn't a magic elixir. It really is the community aspect. It's the fact that they share meals together, the fact that they take care of one another, and that they rest, and that they maybe tomorrow, except for the planes flying in and out, there's just a lot of maybe tomorrow.
And I really appreciate the fact that you talk about community and how important that is. I think that's really crucial. Like I went to school really close to Loma Linda, so I'm really familiar with the blue zone of Loma Linda.
Yeah.
Definitely there's like a cultural and community aspect to that, dietary aspects to that as well. You know, this idea of like certain foods not being good for autoimmunity. And
Right.
we're finding like across like the clinical, the scientific community, even the
Yeah.
dietitian community, there is no one specific diet.
Right.
And
Right.
what works for one person doesn't work for everybody. And like culturally,
Right.
like to tell someone
Right.
to not eat beans, you know,
Yeah.
I'm Mexican American, not eating beans is, it's not gonna happen. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, totally. Maybe not eating beans from a can that you haven't prepared yourself is kind of what I would say on that one too. When I lived in India, it was just so interesting. You can always hear, you could like walk around at a certain time and hear the pings of the pressure cookers all going off in the houses. Maybe that's partly to do with their health. It's also their own traditions and practices. But again, there might be, I didn't spend too much time in the hospitals and things like that. There might be people with these sensitivities, but it's fascinating that when you are also preparing your own food and you are soaking your own foods and cooking them yourself and creating them in the right conditions and standards. I don't have the exact scientific research on it, but maybe that's why it's sort of easier for them to digest them as well. When I was there, I was talking to my partner. I was like, I just want to know how many individuals are living with the following pathologies on the island. I don't know if that pathology even exists here. There's definitely some cardiovascular health. There was some obesity in the younger populations, not in the individuals who were 80 plus. There's some type 2 diabetes as well, but I spoke to the pharmacist and she said it's, from her experience from living in the States, is nothing, and going to school in the States is nothing proportional to what she sees in Ikaria compared to what she saw in the United States.
So that's probably like another conversation for another time, but we need to work
Yeah.
on this, Erin.
April, I'm available. We know people. I'm available. We can have this conversation for sure at a later
We need
time.
to expand these blue zones. You know, we need to
Yeah.
continue to build these communities and this
Yeah.
lifestyle and really
Yeah.
address these social determinants of health. I love this
Yeah.
stuff.
Dan Buettner also really talks about happiness, and he has this quote and the hashtag Blue Zones of Happiness. And I have a tradition. I love things like writing postcards because it's a time for me to be on an airplane or be on a ferry and to be sharing in love and the experience that I'm having. My friend the other day was like, wait, why don't you just do one of those online postcards when you just, you stamp a pic and then you just send it to the person online? I said, because I don't think it's going to give me the same sort of happiness and fulfillment as relaxing, breathing into my thoughts, having some time in order to put pen to paper, which we know is also brain development, neuroresonance we were talking about. We know that that's helpful for your brain to actually do those activities and things. But I kept on, that was the same thing that I wrote consistently in my postcards was, let's make our own blue zones. Let's find our own blue zones in order to really live these benefits that they have. Oh, and one last thing I forgot to share. All of the blue zones commonly, in Ikaria, they do drink coffee in the morning. So that's another thing. My patient's like, I haven't had coffee in 11 years. Or I had a woman not too long ago who said that she hadn't eaten pasta or watermelon in almost 20 years. And I was just like, whoa, 20 years of no watermelon. It's a great source of lycopene. I don't know what I would do without that. I share that story often, but in Ikaria, they are drinking coffee and they're eating plenty of watermelon. It comes in on the ferries, but they drink a lot of tea and they have a lot of herbs and they drink oregano tea, which I don't think we are very accustomed to here. They drink mint tea. They drink this mountain tea that's literally fire. It's amazing. But they're drinking these teas that have all of these different properties in them, different polyphenols, different carotenoids, and different phytonutrients that definitely, I'm sure scientists want to study them and explore them. But for me, is again, a sort of a tradition that we know for a long period of time. Before there was naturopathic medicine or these other types of medicine, we have osteopathic medicine, allopathic medicine. There was really a lot of botanical medicine and there was plenty of physical medicine. And there was a lot of community space and elders and individuals we went to for, I have a headache, I take this herb. I have a stomach ache, I take this herb. I use these teas, I use these poultices, and I use these other herbal modalities to help improve my immune system. And years later, we now have the research on, the healing properties, the antiviral properties, the antiparasitic properties, the antibacterial properties. But it's great that they've been doing this on this island for thousands of years. Hippocrates, I kept on saying, I said, I wonder if Hippocrates went to this island, considering he's the Greek grandfather of medicine or father of medicine.
Who knows? But yeah, really the answers to healing are so often within as well, right? And the power of community.
Yeah.
And that's really what this podcast is about. That's really what this community is about. That's what we're about.
Yep.
That's what we're doing. And so
I'm happy to be a part of it. My quote is really, "We're better together." It's not an original quote, but that, and it takes many villages in many different ways in different communities.
Right. Yeah, I love this conversation. As we close this interview, I have a question for you about advice that you would give to somebody who is going through this autoimmune struggle, someone who's gone to all these doctors. Maybe they can't even get a diagnosis. They don't know what's going on, feeling out of control with their body. They're confused. There are no answers out there. And then they come to speak to you in naturopathic medicine. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's going through this struggle of non-diagnosis or these strange health symptoms?
I have recently come back to something that I've known to be really tried and true. Greece, my intuition spoke to me many times, like, don't go on this hike, or maybe get food, or maybe close the door, or maybe use a little bit of essential oils for insect repellent, different things like that. So I've been reinvigorated with a question that I ask my patients. Oftentimes, do you have an intuitive feeling as to what's going on? Is something that I oftentimes really like to ask. Beyond a family history, I also really do like the implementation of community. So I really do try to find like-minded individuals for them to be around, and or support groups, and or a referral network. I have a very tight-knit referral network of rheumatologists and endocrinologists that I am willing to work with. And similar conversation to the beginning, I like to really have the yes and conversation, the no and conversation. I do sometimes just write a long list of possible diagnoses, and I like to cross things off, is what I like to do, because it's a lot easier for me to sort of start really big and go smaller than it is for me to just constantly be having to throw other things into the system. A great part of being a naturopathic doctor is we have access to a lot of cash-based labs that are a lot less expensive than if you were to run them through the standard lab model, which allows me to run something like an ANA for $93 to $115, compared to sometimes when I have to run it at a bigger lab, they'll tell the patient that it's something like $700 to $1,000 to run this particular subset of labs.
Wow.
So it's nice to be able to increase access in that way. I also do just spend a lot of time counseling and motivationally interviewing patients on what it means to be your own healer. I think there's this conversation that oftentimes is about responsibility, like it's your responsibility for this. It's often like being your own healer is oftentimes saying, this is a terrible, awful experience, but I also know that I can get through this. And I might not have the support system that I need, but I am actually strong enough to make my way through this. And I can be supported mentally this way, physically this way, emotionally this way, even oftentimes metaphysically in some way for some patients. If they're willing to go there and into biofield medicine, that's someplace that we have to go to. I recently saw a gentleman, in fact, yesterday, who was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and it comes out that it's actually not rheumatoid arthritis, and it's another pathology that we need to do some more investigation on. But it was really about bringing in what he knew in his younger self, you know, his more intuitive side, that into the healing aspect, that we finally realized that it wasn't this as much as it could possibly be another diagnosis. So that's what the real thing is. It's also really taking away blame and shame in being in a particular model or medical system. And it's really about finding, again, that community of doctors, of healers, of support, and of someone else who can just sort of sit and hold space with you. Sometimes they might need to empathize. Sometimes they might need to sympathize, but sometimes you need a hand on your shoulder and to be said that we're going to try to work together and we're going to try to figure out what's going on. And it might not feel like it, but it's going to be okay.
What a beautiful conversation. I really appreciate this. I'm learning
Yeah, it
so
was
much
awesome
from
chatting with you.
So,
It was awesome chatting with you, Dr. Marie. Now it's been fun.
Thank you. Could you tell us how we could get in touch with you? If anyone in the community has questions about naturopathic medicine and autoimmunity, how can they find out more information? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, my website's currently in the works, but it's just Dr. Erin Biller, just kind of exactly how it says. I also have an Instagram. It's drbiller.nd. I get a lot of direct messages, and I send people to my scheduler or simple things I can sort of talk about, places that I'll be giving talks on, things, or ways that we can sort of come together, as well as sort of similar to finding like-minded people, even through meetings with the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, or getting people to find other practitioners and health professionals in their area
Yay.
where they can do that.
Definitely. I'm so excited as well that the conference is coming up soon.
Me too. I look forward to seeing everyone at the membership meeting.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Biller. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Dr. Marino. It was awesome chatting with you. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. If you like what you heard, come and follow us and subscribe on iTunes or give us a review. Also, you can join us on the Facebook group, The Sisterhood of Limitless Living, or come visit me on my website, aprilmorenophd.com. Take care.